All right, get started with this. Those who are paying attention and listening, I appreciate it. This is a podcast we're looking to do to kind of reset the scene as we move into our first real off season. We have had a great first year. We want to make sure that we continue with that. With this league moving forward. So the intention is to kind of set the scene, give the group an understanding of what to expect, especially newcomers that have joined. We've got 4 vacancies we're still trying to fill for this season. But the 13 people that have joined, we want to make sure that they are comfortable with what to prepare for and give everyone the tools necessary. So I'm going to run through kind of what to expect for this upcoming auction, provide some insight on what expectations we might see in terms of actual utility, and then I have something I wanted to share with the group just for fun, and hopefully it'll add a little bit of value to the league. So first and foremost, a little bit of the timeline that's expected. Mid-May through June is kind of going to be our hotspot of activity for this league. As a reminder, up to May 15th is going to be the deadline for making cuts for players that you want to be considered for transfers. That means that players that have eligibility still on your team can be removed and they will be automatically considered transfers. This was the window set since like March or something like that. So that'll be something to prepare for. I'll set that deadline for May 15th. That way make sure everything is ready for the auction, which will be starting on the 16th. So once 16th rolls over, we will have the auction be made available to everyone. The only players that will be available are upperclassmen, so players with more than that have had more experience than just their first season in the NFL, and they will be available. Any player that doesn't have eligibility remaining will be removed, and we'll rely on people to make sure that they're checking. I will put as many people on the can't add list as possible, but that is not something I can fit 100% of the time, given that there's now red shirts and stuff like that in this league. So something to be mindful of is that we'll be starting on the 16th. Only upperclassmen will be available. That is the period also that we will be doing transfers. So if the player was cut prior to that May 15th deadline and is acquired during the auction portion from the 16th until the 31st, 29th, 31st, around then, that'll be a transfer that has gone to a new team. If a player that you had owned at that time goes to another school, you will get 50% back on what they go for. So I transfer someone. We'll go over some examples in a minute, but I'll get back 50% of what they go to for that new team in that auction. On May 31st, I will kind of lock we'll stop on the 29th, I think, for upperclassmen. I'll have 2 days to kind of run out the rest of the pending auctions at that time for upperclassmen. And then on May 31st, I, being the commissioner, will go in and auto-nominate all the players, the freshmen that are incoming freshmen that were selected in the Devy. And so that'll be something that I will take care of. All their bids will be set at 0, so anything beyond that point you will be able to keep. I'm not too worried about if you win one of these Devy players that you don't want. You can always cut them immediately, and there's no penalty to it. So if you don't want that player anymore, I'm still going to nominate them. You can hope that other people will bid, but you can always cut them immediately. And that'll be kind of the kickoff of the freshman portion of the auction, which is the main icing on the cake, cherry on top, everything that we are looking forward to is kind of the kickoff at that point. So then probably 2 weeks into June will be the primary freshman auction, but that auction will extend. There is still the ability to get upperclassmen during that piece, and that'll extend through August. I won't know the closure date for the auction until probably sometime in May, and I'll make an announcement of when that closure is. As a reminder for people, is that last year we ran into a part where cuts for training camp weren't happening until like the day of the auction closing, so it was very hard to get all that stuff prepared. So I will set the closing date of the auction sometime in May once the NFL announces that cut down point. So something to be mindful of. And talking about transfers, we wanted to talk a little bit about strategy. Big question when it comes to this time of the year is, when does it make sense to cut a player that you especially want to try to get money for? One is the time of the year. I've been really pushing to just tell people don't make any cuts until May. You have the ability to do so, just to give everyone plenty of time if they don't have the ability to wait till May or whatever. But there's no real incentive to drop early. So you might as well wait till you have all the information. Might as well wait till the NFL draft is over or something like that before you make your decisions. You also want to consider the types of players that are worth transferring. High valuable players, quarterbacks. Those are the positions and player types that are going to fetch the highest price in this format. Just from experience of doing this type of thing in other places, people aren't going to spend money, especially prior to freshmen, if they don't have a whole much value. So they might go for $0, but if someone's going to spend $1 or $2 on a borderline rosterable player, it's probably not something you really want to consider at that point in time. So the other thing to really consider is the flooding of the market. You have, numerous other conference people that are considering these same situations. You want to make sure that not everyone is flooding the market with transfers, because then who's really going to buy them? If people are putting up all their quarterbacks, for instance, then it's like, well, do I need to pivot and now become a buyer instead of a seller? Those are things to consider. So I put on there, this is something that I shared, I think, last year. It's just kind of a preamble to this league, but I wanted to reiterate this, like what really is going to dictate transfer prices. One is the number of buyers. The more people that are interested, the higher the price usually goes. The less means, it takes two people to set a market. The more means it becomes more contested, more valuable. The number of transfers is obviously a thing I mentioned, flooding the market. If there's fewer people and they're more highly sought after, that will raise their price. If it's the number of transfers is high and the talent level is not very good, the price is going to be considerably lower. And then the other thing to really consider with this piece is that the incoming freshmen play a huge part. They are the really the main piece of how you improve your team and main means of getting new talent in. Transfers should hopefully be rather sporadic. People throughout the year, I expect, every year there will be a few teams that are looking to sell a few players. But the primary driver is you want to get freshmen. They're the ones that you have the longest control over. They're the ones that have the highest ceilings. They're unknown. They have the ability to give you a much higher output. So their incoming value, if it's a strong class, people are maybe not as likely to spend money on upperclassmen. They're more likely to maybe save their money during that upperclassman transfer part of the auction that's at the beginning, before save that money so they can spend it on freshmen. So those are things to consider. One thing I wanted to kind of do is work through an exercise of like what I would do if I was a team. So I'm going to use Iowa State. They're a current vacant team. They have a lot of players graduated last year. Their previous coach didn't necessarily pay too much attention, which was unfortunate. And I think he actually quit like 2 weeks into the season, which was just so bad. But at this point, he's got, I think I identified like 4 transferable assets that I think would maybe fetch a price. And I kind of wanted to go through the rationale of like, what would I do if I had these pieces? So these are the 4 like valuable pieces, and then he's got a bunch of like bench fill-in players to fill out the rest of his roster. But his highest asset right now, is my estimation, is Kyle Pitts. Given that it's a tight end, and tight ends are not nearly as sought after or valuable in this format, given that they don't have a starting requirement, Kyle doesn't take necessarily the much, but he's very productive. He's expected to be even more productive this year. He also has some of the highest eligibility left, given that he's a sophomore. So there's 3 years, including this year, that a team can control him. That eligibility threshold is very alluring. If I can get 3 years of a player versus 2, that's an extra year of production, extra year of not having to spend money on freshmen to fill those spots. So he, I would think, would be the most valuable asset and would fetch the highest return. The next would be Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is a senior quarterback. Don't necessarily know what the Giants will do with the draft at this point, but if they stick with Daniel Jones for one more year, he's going to be productive. Quarterbacks that are in starting roles always produce points. He might not be the highest ceiling like a Kyler Murray or Justin Herbert type level player in this league, but he will for sure produce some points, which could be a great QB2 or a team that's got a lot of other talent other places. He can help fill that, and the QB value in this league is paramount. Not having a QB really means you're not going to compete. So I would think he'd be the second most valuable asset. Then Claypool and Sanders are kind of the neck and neck in terms of other assets that he would have. Claypool's able to at least be productive. I think he put up 150 points, which is pretty good for like a third or fourth wide receiver at this point in time. He has 2 years of eligibility, which kind of edges that Miles Sanders piece. Miles only put up like 120 points last year, and he's a senior. So those are the 4 assets. If I was him and I was really contemplating what my team looks like this year and what direction I wanted to go, I'd probably consider transferring Daniel Jones. I might consider transferring Miles Sanders and Claypool. The one I'd be on the fence maybe about is Pitts. Given that you have 3 years of control, you can, you'll have new freshmen in by the time he's a senior. Do you want to put that out there? But his value is so high, I think, people would pay a price for him, and given that he's 3 years, you probably would see a sizable return. So that can be an enticing piece to kind of jumpstart your rebuild in this format. So I wanted to play that example so you can kind of look through your teams and kind of decide, especially if you're a team that had a bunch of graduates last year or was a little bit neglected by a previous coach or something like that, that you can kind of look through the roster and kind of make those decisions and maybe go through those mental exercises that I just went through. Hopefully that's helpful. One thing that is important for us this season than last is this matter of copy management. Because every conference has 2 copies to it, so theoretically there could be points in time where we are having to decide which copy is the one up. And so I've worked through kind of what I'm planning on doing. And I want to make sure everyone else understands so that when we're in the middle of the auction, people aren't, I know it's still going to happen, but people will be less likely to clamor of like, well, I thought this guy had a red shirt, and I can explain at least the rationale as to why they do not. So, first instance is if a school drops a player for a transfer and they are nominating them, that is the player copy that is selected, unless that copy was won. So if we wanted to go back and like say I dropped Daniel Jones, but there was another copy in the Big 12 that was dropping Daniel Jones, and I were to nominate Daniel Jones in the upperclassman transfer piece, that'd be my copy as Iowa State. That'd be my copy that I'm putting up there because I'm the one intending to get some money on the transfer. If that copy was owned previously, let's say one of these other examples had taken first, where some other team put that up there and my copy had a red shirt or not, or it was dropped first, that would be the other copy. So that's that first one. That one I felt was the easiest to kind of put that rationale that I'm dropping the player in school and I'm putting them up for nomination. That's my copy I'm putting up there if there's 2. A copy of a player that was owned will be selected first is kind of the next one. Is if there's multiple copies, one of those copies wasn't owned versus another one. The one that was owned will be the one that's put up first. That's kind of meaning that the free agent is not going to be put up if there's one that owned, because the one that was owned is sought to have a transfer fee usually associated with it. So that's that kind of rationale. Copy of a player with the most eligibility will be the one selected first. So if we use that Daniel Jones example, let's say one had a red shirt versus didn't. The one that had the red shirt would be the one that's selected first. And then the intention is that more eligibility is more sought after, so it's most likely to be the one that's put up first. So that's that kind of piece. And then even the differentiation between one that has a medical and one that doesn't, because medicals can be applied still after the fact. Freshmen are the only ones that can get traditional red shirts. That is that ability to put a medical still is deemed valuable. So if they're both red shirt juniors or something like that, but one is a traditional red shirt and one is a medical, the traditional one will get put up first because it still has the opportunity to get a medical at a given point. Copy of a player with less player awards will be selected first. Player has a conference award logged compared to a copy that doesn't. One that doesn't have an award will be nominated first. Kind of intention is that, and this is obviously if there's other criteria that's kind of in a priority. So the first one will always kind of trump the others to most options. Then it kind of works its way down this list. So if a player copy had, same eligibility, same, red shirts that were applied or whatever, the one that had not gotten an award will be nominated first. So that way there's less likely that they leave for early declare for our NFL draft. Those types of things will be consideration. And then if everything is the same, it's not even being put up by the school that first selected them, then it's going by timestamp. So on MFL, there's a transaction page. I will look up which copy was dropped first. That one will be the one that is selected for that piece. I fully expect not a lot of people to really kind of follow these rules, but it'll kind of have to be applied after the fact, and I'm really hoping people that transfer them are keeping tabs on this stuff. Because again, I always kind of hold this mantra, it's easier for everyone to kind of watch their own team than me watching 100 teams. And there will be probably some give and take. There'll be a lot less incentive because the transfer fees will all be applied for before freshmen come in. So I know the main meat and potatoes of the auction will not really have this impact in there because no transfer fees will be applied, and I can worry about the eligibility piece kind of more after the fact. But I expect questions. I expect there will be some little hiccups this season with what's the protocol, who's really up given a free agent or something like that. So let's talk a little bit about the auction itself. Last year we had the startup, so everyone was kind of fighting for the same pool of players, had the same needs, had the same budget too. So just as a reminder, if you haven't been in an auction before, or you've kind of don't remember, whatever you want to call it. Some auction tips, really great to have a set expectations on this. There will be price enforcing in this league. The more years this happens, the more people get comfortable with it. They know what they want to spend on players. They will enforce the price. So a quarterback going for cheap, people will eventually learn I can't let quarterbacks go for cheap. I need people to pay a premium for those positions because the value of getting a cheap quarterback is too big of an advantage, because then I can come back and use that money someplace else. I can make my team even stronger. So I expect there to be price enforcing. Do not be surprised as well if you see last second bids. There are people across the world that are participating in this league. We have people in Germany, we have people in other countries, people in different time zones. Everyone's schedule is different, so don't be upset if you see last second bids. It's just kind of a part of the game, and it's better to set that expectation now than getting frustrated in the middle of the auction. Same thing goes with infrequent participation. People might kind of sit back, let the board kind of play out for the first day or two of an auction, just to kind of get a feel of what people are spending on and where. And people just get busy. I get busy with work, or I have some prior commitment at the evening, and I'm maybe not looking at the board at the same time all the time, or I'm not putting up nominations on that frequency. It's just going to happen. We have a lot of people in this league, so don't be surprised if you see a flood of participation at weird hours. I think Colorado State, like, it's seen him in a few auctions at this point. Like, he operates on a much different timetable than a lot of people, so he will be up at like 3 a.m. bidding on players, and people like Lewis will get up at like 4 a.m. to make sure that their bid went through. So setting that expectation will be helpful. But we also, this is kind of one of the reasons why we kind of set a large clock. 12 hours of being the highest bidder means you win the player. That kind of thing allows this flexibility, allow people of different lifestyles to participate at their convenience. So I think those are valuable things to keep in mind. The other thing is using nominations. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I think it's 3. I think it's 3 nominations per school. I'll double check that and make sure that's up there. But people use nominations very differently. People flood the board with them. They want to get all the talent out there, or they'll withhold the talent. Those are all strategies. I am not going to get upset with a conference if they are having a smaller board, or if they keep the board really full, or they're putting up the same players over and over. Reminder that because we have 2 copies per conference, there can't be the same copy up at the same time. So there will not be, in this picture over here, there's a Tua Tagovailoa. There can't be 2 copies of him up at once in this format. It's just an MFL thing. So there is some kind of strategy to when to put players up. There's no real opportunity to kind of check outside of maybe checking one of the modules that I made, plus also the free agent listing of who's owned for those copies, to kind of get an understanding. Is this the second copy? Is this the first? You'll have to rely on yourself to do that. I've tried to put as many tools out there, but this is just kind of to put this little caveat in the league. That's going to be on each team to manage that piece. So nominations are very important and can be used in a variety of ways. Finding the way you want to use them and when you want to use them is important. So just be aware of that. Use your money effectively is another thing I would like to make sure is conveyed. You don't get to carry the money with you. Whatever you spend is spent. You don't get to carry any money over season. So make sure you're using it correctly. Make sure that means being more aggressive on bids, or waiting or withholding money to use a lot more later. Just know that anything left behind is going to be used. Some people also in the main part of the auction will not spend everything. They'll leave a few funds left, given that it's a long tail of an auction where the auction is remaining open from June until sometime in August, and people can go in there and bid. And then in August there's usually a little bit of a flurry, so saving a few extra dollars can be beneficial, where you can get that last few bench players that you want to fill, or walk-ons that you want to fill, can be advantageous too. So and with a lot of the bidding is making sure that you understand this is a proxy system. So when you go into MFL, you're going to set bids over in this little box on the auction page. This is kind of what the auction page will look like. These this little parentheses will be your a team's remaining amount of funds at that time. It doesn't account for the proxies. It'll account for whatever's added up for these positions. But you can set prices like this Lamar Jackson from Purdue. His price could actually be $50. He could have set a $50 price. And so as you upbid on this side over here, it could be going up to 46, and Purdue will remain the highest bidder. The proxy system is kind of you setting your ceiling on what you want to spend, and it can kind of help manage your funds much more effectively than if you were setting a bid and it went right to that amount. on a live bidding thing, this proxy allows you to kind of see what the other team will spend the most on, and it'll kind of be cost effective for you just being $1 more than the second highest spended team on that player. Walk-ons, once you exhaust your money, you can still spend money on players for $0 in the auction. The lowest bid that you can put a player on is $0. So walk-on is really any player you get for $0. And like I mentioned, the long tail of the auction, there will be people throughout the summer that will be dropping players for $0 throughout, depending on what happens. Someone might go down or someone might get injured. That's kind of what the walk-on piece is. I'm just going to go over this table really quickly. Some very common things that happen. The more money, the higher the price will be for players usually. This is when people have money to spend, so the higher, less money there is in the available pool usually means the less average price a player will go for. Eligibility will always be seen as more costly than versus not. Usually, there might be a few examples where someone spends more for a less eligible player, but if they're all things are considered the same, besides their eligibility, that copy that has more eligibility will require a higher price. And so, if you were spending something in the upperclassmen auction, really consider how many years are available left. I would not be spending a lot of money on seniors. Personally, just given that I only get that season and anything could happen in that season. So it kind of really hampers your ability to be effective and kind of keep your competitive window open if you're spending too much money on seniors or upperclassmen and not enough on freshmen, because the eligibility piece is always something to be considerate of. Like I mentioned earlier, the number of nominated players, usually less players on the board, means the price goes up. People kind of get itchy. They want to keep spending money on it. And then if the board is flooded with talent, with players, money gets spread around. People aren't able to allocate dollars everywhere. So just be mindful of how full the board is. Usually can dictate how high prices are. Some reminders as well that expect a shift to freshmen this season. Freshmen are the crown jewel of this offseason. They're going to be the thing that everyone is searching for. So everyone is going to want to spend money there. Another thing to consider is school needs. The startup, everyone had pretty much similar needs. They needed quarterbacks, they needed wide receivers, they needed running backs, and how they necessarily got those was a little bit different, but now there are more stark needs. There's less availability of players, and means pricing will be changing this season. So if I know a team needs a quarterback, they have no quarterbacks, or I see that they have one quarterback, I can make a anticipatory, strategic move to, like, I know I need a budget more for quarterbacks because this team could potentially all need quarterbacks, and the more competition for those pieces, especially the freshman level, will drive that price up. And the other thing is the budgets have changed, and they're not all the same. So as a reminder, and I'll show something a little bit later, but everyone gets $200 every year, and then there's bonus dollars that are given throughout the season for wins, player awards, players that leave and that are productive get money. There's money I think there's 2 teams that had to actually spend money to retain players because they were going to leave early or were going to transfer out on their own, and that money was used to kind of placate that. So make sure that you know that people's budgets are different. Kind of makes people who are leaner or have less money might want to be a bit more conservative with what they're spending or when they're spending it to try to make sure that they're maximizing that dollar. So, and like I said, this is kind of the recruiting budget distribution. Average amount right this season is $216. The lowest is $195 and the highest is $241. I think the lowest is UConn, and UConn only because I think they had to spend $20 to keep Jalen Hurts from transferring, and the highest is $241, which was Buffalo. Buffalo had a ton of wins. I think like 15 wins, 16 wins, or something like that season. They had a few college game day bonus dollars. They also had a bunch of player awards. So like their copy of Josh Allen graduated, got $5 for being a first round quarterback in our theoretical NFL draft. He also got the Davey O'Brien Award, which was $5, and I think he even won a conference award. So that copy of Josh Allen got Buffalo quite a bit of money. So 216 to 241 is not a huge difference, but 195 to 241 can kind of look a bit different. But each conference is very, very similarly distributed. I think every single conference is at 216 for an average. So that's kind of the auction right now. I'm super excited. I think this will be a really fun auction. One thing I'm going to talk about in just a minute is to kind of further develop that fund is kind of, we always love to talk about recruiting classes and stuff when it comes to college football. So I went ahead and made this. I think last season we had talked about like how do we kind of make this fun. So I've kind of tried to create a system where we are looking for try to mirror kind of other recruiting class systems like 247 or College Recruits or whatever from ESPN, and kind of look at their systems of how they like decide who's a 5-star recruit and how do they grade recruiting classes for schools. And so I think I use 247's system, and they have this scale where they give 5 to 3-star scores for recruits, and then they base within those star rankings a certain score for that recruit. And so I think it ranged from 110 points to 70. And so the way I came up with something to kind of give us something to kind of grade on is using that 110 to 70 scale. I used DLF Superflex Startup ADP and kind of set that if they're over a certain threshold, so over 100 or less than 180 average draft position for a Superflex startup on DLF in a given month, and usually it's the month that we do recruiting on or start recruiting, so May, they would be a 5-star. And then depending on where they fall on that scale, they would get a score between, I think it's like 98 to 110. And the idea is just kind of like break them apart, give a score for like Saquon Barkley type players versus, like lower five score recruits like Henry Ruggs. Like Justin Herbert was a little bit lower in value than like Trevor Lawrence was when you compare the startup draft positions. So this is just a fun way of like us kind of quantifying these things. People can use them for prep when it comes to the auction each year. I would plan on updating it each season. And with that is then taking the results of the auction and kind of saying, all right, who justifiably got the most talent? Or not justifiably, who potentially got the most talent, and kind of grading how many 5-star, 4-star recruits, and we can compare those classes over seasons. And it's just kind of a fun exercise to say who's been able to pull the most projected talent out of their class for the money that they have. And so you can kind of compare these things down. You can kind of filter for specific groups, and you can see how much their cost is. And the kind of thing that you could see is maybe which teams are better at recruiting, which ones maybe are a little more aggressive, or if they have a certain style, like they always go after the highest priced quarterback, whatever. Hopefully it'll add a little bit of a flavor to it. And the other thing I hope to do is kind of be able to create these analysis pieces of looking at them, getting this like chart on the side here where you can kind of see the spread of what it would cost for a running back that scores at 110 in their class rankings. It could be anything from $90 to $70 for a player of that type, and it maybe will help with you kind of budget those things given given that class. So that's something that I plan on doing this season. Once the auction's completed in the summer, we can kind of do another podcast to kind of talk about these things and sit down and review kind of who maybe did the best or who got the most talent, and kind of set the stage for the season. Considering right now what the 2022 class looks like, it's pretty evenly distributed for most of the positions. I mean, quarterback is a little light. It's kind of dovetails off of a few players, but given that the format is also so QB reliant, I'm okay with that distribution being like that, not necessarily even per category or group. But the other ones are pretty even. There's clearly more talent in the 4-star region when it comes. I think a lot of people say that this is maybe a weaker class comparatively. So, the top player right now is Brees. Top quarterback is Malik. I think the top wide receiver looks like it's Drake London at the moment. You kind of roll down and you see that it looks like Chris Olave is just a little bit south of the 5-star ranking at the moment. Excuse me. You can see kind of where the breakdown is. Wandale's like right at the threshold of a 3 and 4-star recruit. Oh, the other thing I'll add with this scoring system, it'll only look at, I think, at like the top 5 or 6 recruits that you get, and then like the number of recruits you have afterwards kind of tapers off. I don't think it necessarily puts that in here, but it will kind of tabulate that in the score. So something to be mindful of, that when we get through this exercise, there will be teams that obviously have, more, a higher score, and other teams that have grabbed a bunch of talent, but we only kind of like look at the first 6 or 7 highest scoring recruit score players for this thing. Doesn't mean they don't count in this piece, but that's something to consider. So this will hopefully be a fun exercise. Hopefully it'll get people kind of amped and talking about things, especially once we're in the doldrums of summer and it's a little bit boring, but hopefully it makes it seem like a little bit more like college football, which is the intention. And this will be updated, I think, once or twice more, but I'll for sure update it for when May rolls around, so everyone kind of has the best data on what to expect. So I think this could be a lot of fun. It's very, loose. It's not like the best system in the world by any stretch of the imagination. So I know there will be people that can pick it apart and kind of say anything, but this is just for fun. It's just for us to kind of like, do something else, look at things a little bit differently, and have a bit more fun with this information. So, and I hope it can maybe be used like in this capacity for some people that are new, or, I know me and Joey have very big interest in, like, as we get through these seasons, we can kind of look at this data and I can say, oh yeah, the quarterback for a 5-star quarterback was going to cost you $80 regardless, regardless of who it is. It's going to cost you $80 to set that price, and hopefully allow you to budget things a little bit better. So hopefully that's all will be fun. Hopefully people will enjoy it. Last thing is, before we go, quick reminder, we still have a bunch of teams that have yet to vote. There are 3 proposals up. None of these proposals are set to pass at the moment. They need to have 51 approvals, 51 yes votes to be approved. So make sure that you do that. They are set to close May 1st. Lastly is we got 4 spots remaining. Let's see if we can get them closed. If not, I will probably look to try to find some alternatives to kind of keep our timeline going. I can push some stuff back a couple weeks, but I want to make sure that we have time for like scheduling and all those activities. So if we can get these last 4 spots filled, that'd be super, so we can kind of keep our timeline. I will do a check-in with every team. Just message them on Slack, say, hey, are you prepared for this? Yada, yada, yada. Before we do any auctioning. But if we can get those things filled, if push comes to shove and we can't get like some of these really bad teams, like Rutgers is a bad team, or Iowa State, as we indicated, I might just have to, front the money and kind of take them over as the commissioner and set them to autopilot as a potential option, or pay for someone's buy, whatever we need to do to figure it out. But we'll figure those things out. Let me know if you guys have questions with this. I'm super excited. I think we can take another leap and kind of actually get to what a normal season looks like, which should be very, I think, a lot of fun. I think a lot of people will have fun who are not familiar, who are just getting used to the format, who enjoyed it last year. I think it'll go up another level with this freshman auction, barring we don't run into some unforeseen hiccup with like copy management or whatever. But yeah. Oh, lastly, I did go in just as a reminder that I set the Devy orders based on the conference win-loss record last year, and then the tiebreaker for any win-loss record was based on their ranking. So those are all inputted on the message board if you wanted to review them. You can also see who was picked last year and who did potential for the rebate system. So like Oklahoma has got Isaiah Spiller. That's a player that he could have $20 returned for if he wins them in the auction. So something to consider. There are a few players that I've listed as did not declare, so they're not going to be rebate eligible. They're not even going to be accessible in the league, so they'll be cycled back into the pool. But yeah, those are things to look out for, and we should be getting ready to roll. If you have questions on eligibility, there is this eligibility tracker on the page. Kind of see which conference there are. It'll set like which players are available, set their eligibility for you, so you can kind of look for players. You can say, look for Justin Fields. You can see all the Justin Field copies. They're all owned. You can see which ones have freshmen. You can see which ones have sophomore status on them. Things like that. So, yeah, you can use this at your discretion. It'll update somewhat regularly. I have to go in and, like, if someone drops, say, North Carolina dropped Harrison Bryant, I have to, or no, I should update that one. But if, like, Jalen Camp, who Georgia Tech had redshirted, I have to go in and every so often and change the redshirt tracker that I have from tracking as a Georgia Tech redshirt to a free agent redshirt. That'll be something I just need to, I'll be doing every so often. So some of this information might not be the most up to date, but it will tell you who's available at least as people drop players. So be on the lookout for that. This is hopefully a much more usable tool. It'll also show, which players or copies had graduated. So they'll be in red, so I know one of these copies, even if Michael Gallup is showing up in the auction pool for SEC, should be able to feasibly know that they are really not that available. So use this tool. It should hopefully be helpful. Top 5 are up here. The bottom is for the minor conference because I can't get it all to fit, but that'll be that. So with all that said, I think that's the end of this podcast. Hopefully people can kind of find some enjoyment with it. Looking forward to it all. Any questions, comments, concerns, bring them to my attention. If you also know anyone that's interested in those last 4 spots, send them my way. We'd love to get them filled and acclimated to the league as soon as possible. And then next podcast will be kind of probably after the auction sometime in June. So hope everyone has a good one, and yeah, let's have some fun.